Hello and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to a new episode of Inspiring Conversations. Uh, just to remind ourselves why Inspiring Conversations are. It's all about creating conversations that really matter. We are diving into ways to connect deeply, break down barriers, and build moments that inspire trust and growth, whether it's with your team at work or in your everyday chats. We'll bring more positivity, realness, and impact into every conversation. And as always, I tell you where I am stationed. I am on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula in Iceland, far away from the volcano that started erupting again yesterday. I think it erupted for the 12th time. Everybody's safe. There's nothing, no harm. But yesterday we had this weird fog, and we couldn't even see the mountain of Kirkjufell, which is in this picture. And so that was really weird time yesterday. But the volcano is slowing down, I think, and but there still is fog, so I almost can't see this beautiful mountain. So my guest today is a person that has written three books, and this is his first one. It's called Glimmer of a Soul, a collection of poetry, and that brings me to invite him in, and he is from the United States of America. Welcome, Thomas Rodney Wilson.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
So, yeah, you're welcome. So, have you been following the news? Have you seen that the peninsula was yet again erupting, and we have the volcano and stuff?
I honestly have not. I'm going to be honest, I try to avoid the news as much as I possibly can for my own mental health, but
Well,
that's very fascinating to know.
well, that is a good starting point for our conversation because I am trying also to tell people to avoid the news, but somehow this was a important news because we have to we have to be aware that there is something happening in our own country, especially when the nature is doing this stuff to us. So, welcome, and I just want to say welcome to the to hands-on coaching stream and to this inspiring conversation, and thank you for being a sport and participating because you had to reschedule something in your at your end. But we are going to talk about the title that we came on, or the topic that we found came upon, is From Monster to Mentor: The Healing Power of Storytelling and the Fight for Inclusion. It's a heavy topic, and it is a just the four the start from monster to mentor. That is something of a statement. So, but let's start with talking about who are you and why are you, and just give us a little insight in who Thomas Wilson is, because you have probably a little bit of a backstory, because we have to understand who you are and what happened, or did it happen, or like were you born with the thing that we are going to talk about?
Absolutely. So, as stated, I am Thomas R. Wilson, and that title is probably very suited to me. So I grew up in the early 90s, in the the early 90s. I was born in 1990, so the beginning. um and I grew up a fairly happy child, but I also had the weight of a lot of my own mental health diagnosis and a lot of experiences. That's part of where the label of monster comes from, because I started off in my school year very happy, very excited, and passionate about my education. And um, like so many of us, when our mental health or our neurodiversity starts to kick in, there is a really brutal reality, and there's not a lot. I was like 3, 4, 5. I was a prodigy. I had the IQ of a 30, 35, 40-year-old. I had a massive vocabulary. And then my bipolar started kicking in. My depression started kicking in, my anxiety, all of that. And my neurodiversity started kicking in. And very quickly, I went from the favorite student to, just like the title says, a monster. I remember being in 4th grade, 5th grade, people screaming at me that I was a monster, that I was going to end up in jail, that I was too dumb for class, that I didn't try all of these things. And when you tell that to a kid who's young, it has a lasting impact and really, really creates a very negative self-image. And I remember one day I was having a really rough day. I wasn't taught how to communicate, how to share my feelings, how to express what I needed to say. And a lot of what I saw was anger. So that's where I was taught to respond. And I remember this, I started yelling in class, and one of my teachers literally buckled down on front of my desk, got in my face, and screamed that I was nothing and I was a monster and I was going to go to jail. And unfortunately, that was my experience in the education system here in the United States for a long time. I'm not here to say that I was a saint or I made things easy on people, but there's just certain things we don't say to kids, right? There are certain things we
Yeah.
don't tell people at such a young, impressionable age, and we have to put in the work and the effort. And so that was my experience for a lot of time, going all the way into roughly high school years, where I entered into a program. And I remember my first year there, one of my educators, I really liked him. He was a good guy, had a military background. He served as, you know, he had this great military background, being a nurse in the military, helping people. And there was a day, about like almost to the end of the year, I had a really bad temper episode. And I went up to him and apologized. If basically asked me, what were you like when you were first here? And I said, very quiet, and they didn't talk to anyone. And he said, okay, so what do you think came from that anger? And we had a brief conversation, and it ended with him saying, I would rather you be loud and angry instead of being so quiet and so timid and so afraid to talk to people that you are basically non-existent in the classroom. And for me, that might, and those listening, that might sound extreme, but for me, that was like the first sign that someone actually respected me in a long time in my educational journey. And it also showed a great deal of empathy and compassion, which was a huge shocker for me. And so not long after that program, I ended up growing, being the valedictorian of that program the year I graduated high school, something many people said I never would. Not long after that, I went to college, something many people said I never would. And then I graduated, and I became a reading tutor in the local school system. Then I ended up at a day program. And about 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, maybe 12 at this point, I ended up in healthcare, serving as a mentor and a advocate for people like me, people with mental health needs, different diagnoses. And that really started me on a pathway. Um, and as I went, I found I had this really unique voice to help people who many people wouldn't work with, which is fair. It's not, healthcare is not for everyone. But I also found my passion in advocating, helping people develop real life skills. And like so many of us know, when you stop taking care of yourself or treating your mental health care, you go into a rough place. And so in 2021, I was in that rough place. I had faced a lot of challenges, as so many of us did during 2021. And there was a point I said to myself, what do I need to do to change my life? And I decided my business and become a storyteller. It wasn't until mid 2022 when I was fully active. I still work at my day job, which I've been at for 12 years. But since then, it's been a blur. I started with Dungeons and Dragons and helping people access job skills. And then since then, I now have a business that's gained international renown. I've been and still am a state level advocate. I partnered with over 40 businesses in the United States alone. And there's been so much more. I want to kind of stop bragging about myself for a second here. But the beautiful thing in all of this was I was able to take all those strengths, all those weaknesses, all of those lessons I learned, and I utilize them on a day to day basis to help my community, especially through creativity and sharing my story. And also acknowledging if my favorite saying quote is be the change you want to see in the world. And each and every day, hard to remind myself at this point in my life, it's not just me. If I start slipping, it's not just going to impact me. It's going to help impact the youth, the adults, the organizations, and the community I built. And that is an incredibly powerful reminder to care for myself, but also to apply the same care I wanted to see when I was younger to other people.
I don't literally know where I should begin of asking questions because you have said so much, and by keep on bragging because this is unbelievable story, and be proud of your story because as you are focusing on storytelling, my thoughts are just with the ugly duckling. Like, why is it that people can behave like this? But let's start with: isn't it unusual that you are diagnosed with this in like a 3-year-old? That isn't it very? That is, I find that interesting.
Well, I was diagnosed when I was 8, but I was showing signs of it when I was very young.
Yeah.
Um,
Is that normal for the people with bipolar condition, or do you call it condition or a illness, or like what do you call it?
um, I think its clinical name is bipolar disorder, though there are a lot of
Yeah,
people who don't like that phrasing, which I don't blame them for not
yeah, yeah,
liking it.
yeah.
Um, a lot of people, I've noticed a big change. A lot of people are moving towards moving away from those super clinical terms because, as so many of us know, the clinical terms tend to be a bit behind what society actually wants. Not to bash healthcare at all; it's an important, vastly important thing. But for me, I had a lot of external factors. Um, I'm not going to talk a lot about other people other than myself, just some very strong signs. And I definitely had that like ADHD kind of anxiety, compounding things. And I have a lot of, I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of diagnosis, including, being on the spectrum and a lot of things. And so it was very prevalent at a very young age for me, but it didn't really hit until I was about 8, due to a very significant loss in my life, and then like the floodgates opened. And it is very hard to diagnose an 8-year-old with
Mm.
bipolar disorder. Um, but upon that, the symptoms were so significant that yes, it took a while to diagnose, but it became very apparent at a young age.
But like the school system, I can't believe that in the 90s that it had like was it really that horrible? Because this sounds to me like the Dark Ages. What was going on in your school? Like, why is it that? Because we were, I remember, I think here in Iceland or in the whole world, we were talking about there was this talk about in the WHO, they were talking about mental illnesses and stuff that we have to look at them in a different way. Like I was working in Denmark at a like day and night care center where people like we were just being together, and people had their differences, and yes, it was odd, but I had the best time of my life because talk about vivid imagination and stuff.
Mhm.
And that's why it's intriguing that you talk about storytelling, because I know your brain totally, if you are off, then you would be like, boo. And I would just like, no, 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 wait, where are you now? What are you talking about? And that is the fun thing. But why, and have you met the teacher who said that you are a monster and you would go to jail?
So I will say the 90s in the United States was a rough era for mental health care. It's probably a rough era in a lot of places. The United States at that point was learning a lot about mental health care. We were kind of branching through. But for a lot of us, it was a very rough era. Like I know in something I always highlight, and I apologize to any of the audience. I'm working really hard not to traumatize anyone. But the running joke in a lot of American media in the 90s was that if you go to therapy, you have to be insane. Like that was the quote unquote joke that was very popular in that time.
Mm,
And I think part of it was probably a cultural thing in the United States. We, for a long time, did not honestly talk about mental health care. And in the United States in general, a lot of the time, the discussion was, ushering people off to the side versus kind of embracing them. And there have always been great mental health care workers. It's just, and I'm going to avoid some of the history because I do not want to really upset people. But America's relationship with mental health has always been deeply flawed. And it's a lot better now. But part of that is so due to the newer generations, like Gen X, not Gen X. Well, Gen X had a hand in it for sure. But like Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they're really pushing for a better discussion on mental health care. And I know a lot of people critique that, but it's like, if you're 20 and you're arguing for better mental health care, you're obviously not going to have the same insights as someone who's 40. And so it's going to be a little bit different. But I know for a lot of us to this day, our schools are just pilly to really handle the workload. Teachers are deeply overwhelmed on a regular basis. And the kind of being able to wrangle, 17 kiddos who are all having issues and then someone who's deeply depressed or things, it's a system that's not designed to work. It's actually a big part of my youth advocacy to call that out and say we really need to change the United States education system because it overwhelms everybody in one way or another. And then honestly, giving kids homework that takes 5 hours a night and expecting them to come to school rested doesn't make sense to me. It's a whole thing I can get into. Um, but for a long time, just mental health support in the United States was almost non existent. And the schools I went to, there were thousands upon thousands of kids in one building, all trying to make their way through life. And unfortunately, who had skill and had a history of success but didn't know how to work with people. And I will say the school that I went to, partially because of me to a degree, and people like me, brought on a principal who really had a different mindset on mental health and things and really worked intensely hard. He was actually a really important figure in my life because when my teachers would send me to the principal, he would often say, sit me down, talk to me about what happened, and try to help me process it instead of immediately punishing me. But that was like, he was one of the original like that, one of the very few who was trained to that degree. And on top of that, not to ramble, but part of it is, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a lot of stigma. There's still a lot of stigma out there towards those communities, and many, many other others. But the stigma was like palpable and thick in the air growing up. And a lot to this day in the United States, that stigma does not help us, and it hurts us. It kind of pushes us to the side. And doesn't really teach us how to process our emotions. It's part of the reason I'm so big on communication and advocacy, especially self-advocacy, because so many people aren't taught, like I wasn't, how to express their needs when they're angry or how to compassionately communicate something. My own example, when I was a kid, one of the most calming tactile things when I was really stressed was to tear paper, because it just released like this wave of anti-anxiety and anger. But when I was younger, people saw that as just destructive. It was just me tearing something up and creating a mess. And when you're a young kid or even an adult and you're flooded with just anger, anxiety, pain, hostility, like that's a lot for the brain to process. And it's probably why a lot of people do have destructive tendencies. Those quick releases of energy are so wonderful, but they have lasting repercussions. And so that's part of the reason I love things like this squishy bear that's a stress toy that helps me get that feeling out, and this little imp dude who's got this squishy head and stuff. Like, we have these tools now that can help people get those quick releases. But like when I was a kid, I would tear paper and people would get mad at me. I would try to explain, like, it's the only thing that gave me a sense of like immediately release. But when you're met with hostility and you're already overwhelmed, it becomes this sense of like shame and then anger. And then all you want to do is tear paper more and people get madder at you. And so I couldn't communicate that. I didn't know how. And there are a lot of people that I've met have a similar situation.
Well, what comes to mind is also there is a big industry that definitely does not help the situation, and that is Hollywood, because who are the villains and why are the villains? And they are like crazy people, and they picture people as, where do you get the image of that? Because you have a disorder, then you necessarily turn into a murderer or whatever. So when I started to think about it, it started to boil a little bit my blood, because it annoys me when people are projected like everybody is like this. And then if you say that you are going to a psychologist, oh yeah, you must be, because that was the general agenda when I was growing up. And then people who had just ADHD, they were just like, if they were a nuisance in the classroom, they from one week to another, they were all of a sudden they were just, they're in the countryside, because they were just removed from the situation, removed from the area, from the, like, so they were not being annoyed or annoying. But how is it? But it's just, and I'm thinking about the gay community, and like you must have felt like you were the only kid in the world, that you were like, how did your parents, for example, like, you are not the only one from your parents, or like if you have siblings and you are the only one in the group of siblings, like how did they cope? Because the system is in America is not, as I gather, that it is not like a very child-friendly environment, because you just have kids, and then the mother has 3 weeks off, and then she has to go to work. Like, and what do you have? Like, so what were your situations like for your parents? Like, can you elaborate on that, or is that something, an issue that you don't want to talk about? Because this must be something that when you meet others and you start to discuss then the family situation, because this must have been restraining. And definitely if your parents were young parents, in their 30s or something, because can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I will start. My mother has been a single parent the majority of my life. And she went through it, to put it gently. She has been one of my strongest advocates. And that is not to say that we have not had conflict, right? Like she fought for a lot. And as a young kid, I definitely did not always appreciate, but at the same time, I've met so many families where they are only advocate for their family member who is hurting or is diagnosed or is going through things. And this is one of the things that I always try to tell parents, especially if they have young kids or adults who are struggling, is just give yourself a break. Like don't put too much pressure on yourself, because it's an almost impossible uphill battle to make sure every family member is cared for. And things are a lot better now than they used to be in the United States, but they're going to get hard again here pretty soon. Harder than they've been. And it's one of those things where I am amazed by parents of people who have kiddos like I was, or things like that, because they are the warrior, they are the defender, they are the voice. They are, the person charging into battle with schools, demanding that their kid get better care. They are fighting with the healthcare system, thousands or tens of thousands of debt. And that's the thing. Like I learned a lot from my mom about pursuing my dreams, because she always told me, if you want to do something, it doesn't matter if other people think you can't, try it and see how it goes. But she also was exhausted. She works in healthcare too. She was an OR nurse. If you don't know what that means, operating room, and ER. She did a lot. And so as a kid growing up, she would often work like 14-hour days, come home, and then have to deal with everything going on in the world. And so I have a lot of respect for her. And I'd like to say that that was a rare situation, but it's not. There are so many family caregivers in the United States. There are so many nurses who are single moms or single fathers, which I know it's not talked about as much, but single fathers deserve just as much respect, right? It's not always thought of when we think of single parents. So many teachers and educators fight for students and then be told that they can't do something, and then have to tell that to family members and deal with the brunt of that. And so, I mean, the world is getting better, right? There's so much doom and gloom, but there's so much evolution of care. There's so much new opportunities out there. I don't want to be just doom and gloom, because it is. It's changing rapidly. Good people are doing work. Families are fighting for their youth. And it can feel, especially for the kiddos and the parents and the teachers, it can feel so overwhelming and so impossible from time to time. And I think that's where community comes in. And I know in the United States, it's not always like, we're not always big on community, but it's so vital and it's so, so important. And I think, especially in this modern age of mental health care, it's so one of the most beautiful things is there are parent support groups. There are places for like nurses and doctors to go and decompress in like group therapy. And I actually, it's funny that you say it sounds like the dark ages, because I actually tell people on a regular basis, I feel like we are in the dark ages, or like, this point in healthcare, or like even the stone age, really, of utilizing these tools effectively. And I say the stone age partially because we have all these resources around us, but so many people don't know how to access them, don't know how to utilize the tools, don't have the education of how to develop new things. And I think that's where my hope most lies, is in younger generations to gain access to these for people who are older to continue to learn. And I don't say the Stone Age in a negative way. It's a very, like, we have the ability and the tools to move rapidly to and I think that is the inherent thing. We have to continue developing these tools. We've got to continue utilizing them. And especially for families, we've got to continue to offer more and more spaces where they can rest, relax, and have fun. I love that you mentioned like the creativity space with people as well, because that's like often the most freeing and compelling thing for families. They want their kids to have fun. They want to have fun, and offering a space like that where people can embrace fun and creativity, it's a really profound resource.
But it is, although Thomas, it is just like unbelievable that you have to fight for your own survival. That
Mhm.
you, because this thing about there are, what does, isn't it said that everybody is equal? Where is that said? Like you have the founding fathers that everybody has a right to do this and that. But is that only the people who are in the same mold as that you can work, you can do this, you can do that, and then when you have some, like, you have to divert from the road, then you are just like, oh, you're insane, you will become nothing, you will be this and that. And not to talk about, like, you can also then, if you add to the thing, because I know that people can also be like everybody, like you are, maybe you have disorder, and then you are probably, maybe you're gay, and then you're this and that, like, and then you have to fight, really fight for your just place in the world. And it's just like ridiculous how this, okay, I'm appalled. But you are alive. And that is the main reason that, and it's inspiring because how did you manage? Okay, it's a good thing that you had the, what was it? A guy from the military who also had been a nurse who told you to scream and shout, to just be alive, to show, to get the,
Mhm.
to express. And but how is it on your journey? Because you have probably been propped up with pills, medication, medicaments, which often they take people, because I just want to say that the guy who wrote the music in the beginning, he has also been fighting with his disorder, and but he's a great guy because he is just, and he says, when I'm medicated, my creativity just like, and then he feels like, and how is it when you realize when you were probably medicated at some point
Mhm.
and you felt like you were just lame, or you were like you couldn't speak, and there are all sorts of side effects of the, because the medication is so strong. How do you get over this, and when did you realize that, like, because as we mentioned in the beginning, from monster to mentor, it is a colossal, it's a title that is like, you are really literally engaging in a world that is, you have similar stories,
Mhm.
and you have an advocate, and then when you are talking, I was just thinking about the period that we are going into, and inclusion, because you're different, then you just like, you can like go out and just whatever. So how is it for you to, isn't it like the world cycle, like it's just like, how are your feelings? Don't you get mad, or like how do you cope, like how do you talk to yourself? Because if I'm mad, and well, I think I don't have a disorder, because I, like, people sometimes they look at me and say, because my mind is also like wandering, and I'm just having fun. But when you, like, if I'm getting irritated, or like angry, how is it for you? How can you just focus on the positivity and focus on being like, yes, I will. the power of storytelling. And like, how do you do that, Thomas? How do you wake up and say, wow, the sun is shining, it will be a brilliant day?
So I think that, and I will specify, I am someone who takes medications on a regular basis,
Yeah.
but I'll also be honest. It's a rough journey, right? The medication journey is, and I'll be honest, it's not for everyone. Now, I'm not advocating that someone take themselves off of medications
Oh, oh, no, 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 no.
or anything like that, because that is dangerous, right? Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
randomly affecting that is so terrible for the human body and mind. And I will be completely blunt. My experience with medications has been awful for the majority of my life. I think I got.
You
Hopefully,
lagged a
I'm back.
little bit. You
Yeah, I
lagged a
think
little
the
bit.
internet kind of blipped out for a second there. I was gonna say, like my medication journey has been rough, but that's because I honestly think I didn't have a good doctor for a lot of my life, and
Yeah.
so much of a doctor is personalities, how well you work with your doctor, what you're willing to try, all these major things that I think a lot of people don't always feel about. But now, especially now, I've had a doctor who is willing to try things, who is willing to explore other avenues, but is also willing to affect my medications in a really slow but methodical pace so that I can adjust to them well when there is a change. Because that can be a lot. It can be overwhelming, it can zap things. The other thing that I think I've learned about myself is I have a very different creative energy when I'm in a good place. My life kind of hyper fixated on the struggling artist having more value than the happy employed artist kind of mindset. And I think that is a really, both of those can be really dangerous, right? Like believing only the struggling, the poor artist has value is a really self destructive way to be an artist, because it doesn't lead to good things. It just puts a lot of shame, a lot of stigma, and a lot of value on some really dangerous mentalities. Whereas being a very productive artist can feel like you have to be creating at all times, you have to have avenues, you always have to have work. And that's very classic American. You got to work all the time and burn yourself out for your passion kind of thing. Um, in the same thing, I think what I found is a really good balance between the two. And when I started to find the stories that I can tell when I'm happy and when I'm joyful, started taking off, partly because I was someone who could represent that I'm taking good care of myself to people who need an example of how to take good care of yourself. And my work is distinctly different from a lot of different people, but I am a very strong advocate that we put the struggling artist fantasy to rest, because it's not healthy for people who are especially healthy. And I'm going to be honest with you. I do not wake up every day feeling enthusiastic or passionate or um, just overall happy. There are many mornings I wake up miserable. I don't want to do the work that I have to do. I want to sit and play video games and just stop. But what I've learned about myself as well is if I go into that mindset, that is, and I stay there, that is because it doesn't just come from, I want to play a video game. It becomes, I don't want to take care of myself. I don't want to brush my teeth. I don't want to go on a walk, get outside. I don't want to eat. And then that transfers to very quickly, I don't need to take care of myself. And then that becomes, I get really depressed really easily. And then I spiral down. And so I've had to teach myself a lot about my own self care, but one of them has been how easily and how quickly my life can go from really profitable, really exciting, really passionate, to downright low, horrible, passive aggressive, hostile to myself, giving up on things, all of that. And that's why I tell people all the time it's a daily journey, right? We have to pull ourselves out of that. And it's so hard, especially if you're depressed or you're anxious or outside. And I'll be fully honest with you. This might like a joke, but I've been afraid to walk out the front door because my anxiety gives me the worry that there's going to be a meteor that's going to hit me straight through the skull if I walk outside the door. Like these are things that I have not fully shaken. I have just learned how to kind of temper them and control them in a way that's healthy for me. Because if, like I said, if I have that worry, the only way that's going to prove that doesn't happen if I walk through that door. And just like all the pain and the trauma I have, the only way I'm going to move past it is if I put in the work to move past it. And that's the case for a lot of people. And yes, it's hard for so many people because depression is real, self-hatred is real, anxiety is real, worry is real, trauma is real, and it deserves to be valued. It just doesn't deserve to control all of who we are.
Well, and you have a point because wherever we are on the spectrum of life, like everybody goes through a period. But for me, it's just as you say, and it's so inspiring that you like sometimes you have a job and you are like if you go through like I'm a role model, I have to stand up, I have to go out, and then with a meteor like that is just a thing because people can they have anxiety going in a car or like everybody has something, but there is just the size of the worries that are like for some they are like this, but for some they are like this. So it's just but the thing is that it is just like we are not the same. We are not all the same. It's a reason for why we don't look alike. And in my mind, it would probably be horrible if everybody in the world would look like me and think like me and be like me, because then I don't know what the world would look like. But let's go to your like now. I have posted this is the longest URL for a website, Thomas. I was just like, okay, I think I will let him read it, but I will try. So it's RH no, creative created no, creative advocacy and storytelling.net. Yes, I did it. I
Well
did it.
done. I will be honest with you. I registered this into like a month of my business being operational, and I
Yeah.
had no idea whatsoever how cumbersome and how much that would be on people. And I would change the URL, but it would probably affect my entire site,
Yeah.
and I'd have to
Well,
do
it was the glory.
everything over again. And
Yeah. But that is also the glory of when in beginning people like the URL were just like 1 meter long because they people thought that they had to have everything. But tell us, let's go because we so much time flies when you're having fun. We have 15 minutes left. 15, not 50. 15. So, like you say that you have had this experience and you go out and you like it's not enough that you have to go through puberty and you have to go through all of these things and you have to feel like love and like what this and what not and what happening. So when you decide, like when did you find this passion for storytelling? Where do you remember when did you all have you always used storytelling and why was it that you why were you so inspired by storytelling, and why are you such an good advocate for storytelling, and you speak a lot about like your website, which we will talk about later again, with a long title. Like how is it that you as you say you share stories, you talk about yourself, you talk maybe on what is going on in your head, and of course we, I will put quotation marks around it, the normal people, we have to go in and say, okay, Thomas, are you quite here or whatever? But how, when is it that you discover, hey, I'm good at this, SHIT, and let's go from there. Like, what happened? Like, why, how, how did you find a mentor or because it's just like an unbelievable story, Thomas, and it's just like, and I will say it again, keep on bragging because this is like you have to keep on going, isn't it? It's just like life. So
Um,
to get us into like how did you and what did you and why did you like because when you found literally when you found your niche.
so I have always loved storytelling. Ever since I was a young kid, some of my earliest memories are my parents reading to me and telling me stories. So I've always loved them. And this is going to sound entirely like a joke, but when I remember I was about 4 years old and I became obsessed with The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Not many kiddos become fascinated with a macabre poem by a guy who died like 100 years or so before they were
Yeah.
born. But
And
I
the raven is some of a mystical bird because people are seriously afraid of because here in Iceland, if you saw many ravens together, then that was a sign of there was something going to happen, and not necessarily good thing. So they
okay.
they they are like yeah they are, but they are beautiful birds, and I love them. I
Oh
love them
yeah.
today. So
So
okay, sorry.
that was my favorite poem as a young kid. I've loved poetry. I read Robert Frost by the time I was like 7 or 8. Um, but I've always had a knack for words. And I've kind of had this inherent kind of sense of loving storytelling. I remember being obsessed with um, Dr. Seuss as well because I loved how he formed words. Um, but I know a particular point when I really wanted to be a storyteller was my mother took me to a giant arts and storytelling festival in Vermont. I grew up in New England and I saw all of these amazing storytellers. And for a while, I was just wanted to be a novelist. And I've told my story my entire life. I've written, as mentioned, I've written several books, but I've had this knack for poetry and for writing ever since I was quite young. And so I've studied like books, movies, all kinds of different things to help me grow. But I've also been largely self taught in a lot of my work. And so as I got older, speaking of Dr. Seuss, All the Places You'll Go became a very significant book for me. If you don't know it, it's a book about this person who just travels and sees all these different points of the world, all these unique things. But that book actually popped up when through numerous points throughout my young adulthood, when I was struggling or when I had successes. And I did not prompt them for this, but when I graduated from my program and from high school, the school actually gave me the book, All the Places You'll Go, and gave me a card. And it was a beautiful send off because I had realized it. And as I got older, especially when I started advocating for myself and others, that popped up. But also when I opened my business, like that was a heart, and it's very different than what I was expecting I would be doing in storytelling. I'm not going to lie, but it is. But to sum all of this up, stories have been my passion, they've been my hope, they've been my ambition, they've been my friend, they've been my ally, my enemy. I've always had this really distinct comfort and love with books and storytelling. And to this day, it's part of the reason I love to do storytelling events like Dungeons and Dragons or public speaking or whatever, because it's this really beautiful tool that a lot of people love that's not utilized a lot nowadays, but also really just helps people to find their voice as it did me and help me, and really motivates people to try new things, to really creative element.
But how is it? Sorry, me for asking, because I'm not a Dungeon and Dragons type of guy. I took my son once to this event where they were painting the soldiers or whatever the creatures are called, and you can like when you are in that world, it's a big world, and you get like they the stories they pull you in. Isn't that a little dangerous in like in this kind of mental state? If you are like you can't be obsessed with it, and you just you live it, and like how is it? You are not afraid of using that kind of, or maybe I'm. Is it a stupid question? Like, have you thought about it, or have you talked about it? Because now I feel a little bit like I'm judging. Am I
I
judgmental when I ask you about it?
So no, it's fairly common for people to get pulled into things, especially if they're not doing well mentally.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that really depends on where you are in your mental health journey. Um, I have been lost in stories in a not so healthy way in the past, but I think that's part of the mental health journey is learning where to put your boundaries up, learning where to go and where not to go. And so when it has that, and this happens to people on a regular basis, fairly common, people become deeply engrossed to an unhealthy level. The advice that I give people is set up boundaries before then, right? Like create a pathway, a way to move forward. When it comes to stories, as someone who's been lost in those things before, separate from those stories, right? Like don't if I feel myself getting too engrossed, take time away from it, step away from it, and reset myself mentally. It doesn't happen to everyone, and yes, it has happened to many people, and it continues to. But I think that's also where choosing the media that's good for you and choosing the media that's bad for you, right? You don't necessarily have to have a mental health diagnosis to become engrossed with the story to such a degree that it becomes unhealthy. It's also, it's kind of like addiction. You can become addicted to anything at any time, especially if you're not caring for yourself and drawing boundaries with that thing. And similarly, there are lots of neurotypical people who have deeply unhealthy boundaries with argument against like certain types of inclusion and come from an unhealthy place. You get so attached to it that you cannot fathom them being something different than what you have. And that being said, this is a very important thing to say. A mental health issue and a mental health diagnosis or lived experience can be vastly different things. A diagnosis does not mean you're automatically going to struggle every single day and you're not going to have that. But there are people who are not diagnosed and may never be, who are also going to struggle with depression, anxiety, worry, pain, obsession. And you don't need to have one or the other. You don't need to be neurotypical or not diagnosed or live without all these things, to walk a really unhealthy, dangerous path. And I think a lot of people tend to jump to that kind of mindset just for those with a diagnosis, partially because of the world stigma to a degree. There just has to be responsibility for the self, for the mind, for the person. And I think it's so, so vital in this type of conversation to say that respect for your own mental health is just as deserving as it is to take care of your heart and your liver and your lungs and things, right? But it's a core component of who we are as people, and therefore deserves to be a healthy pathway for you.
Wait, like no, you are, this is just magic. Like you are so composed. But it is like, why is it? Because we talk about the rainbow flag, and if the flag or if life would not be filled with colors, then oh my Lord, or whoever we believe in, wherever we believe in them, how life would be dull if we don't have any. Like, life has to be fun, and we are not
Mm-hmm.
all the same. But just because we only have 3 minutes, believe it or not, the bullies. Have you gone to a reunion and have you met them? Have you talked to them? Have they been in contact? Or is that a thing of the past and you said F them and moved on your life? Sorry, I'm just because it annoys me when you use bullying to hide your own security.
Mm-hmm.
Hide your, because that is the thing, that you are bullying another person to be something else than that you are in the world. And the orange is doing a great job in belittling people and whatnot. Sorry for saying, but like, have you met them? Have you met your classmates since then, or have you just written them off?
So I'm gonna kind of combine it. I don't think I've written them off. I think I'm just at a point in my life where I am not interested in investing in people who may be dangerous or hurtful or hostile. And I know that can sound like, oh, someone's being stubborn, but this life is too short to invest in people who are going to abuse you, who are going to mistreat you, who are going to hurt you. And I don't mean just exclude someone because they're challenging one day. I mean, don't be with people who are going to hurt you, who are going to and not take accountability, not seek forgiveness, genuine forgiveness, right? Everyone has people in their life they love and they're mean and nasty sometimes and crush you and make you miserable all the time. In my opinion, that is not someone anyone should have in their life. And I know there's a lot of people who really benefit from people trying to give people more chances than they deserve. But at the same time, when you have that mindset, it's so important to distinguish genuine intentional harm upon you and just being a human and experiencing those intentional, like those unintentional whims, right? If I had lost everybody who viewed me as angry and mean, I wouldn't have the majority of the people in my life. But I have also been someone who has loved and shown compassion and fought for and encouraged and brightened the day of many people in my life. And that is such a distinctly different thing than being a bully.
Let's end with that because that is the best ending. That because you have to move on and you have to embrace the life that you are meant for. And although the title of the conversation, like from monster to mentor, the healing power of storytelling and the fight for inclusion, That is so accurate because I am, well, it's not often that my jaw drops, but you have been amazing. And thank you, Thomas. And thank you for, it's just, we all have an agenda on this earth. And as you mentioned, life is short and use the time wisely because you are here on a mission. And your mission is to help others see through the dark times. So thank you a lot. This has been absolutely brilliant conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it. But just before we wander off, I just want to say that you can people can find you on LinkedIn and they can approach you there, and then you are on Threads, which is threads.com / at RH storytelling. I didn't realize. I thought it would be your name. So threads.com / at RH storytelling. Please look Thomas up and please like take part in his effort to in the storytelling business. And we are all different. And then visit his website, which I'm not going to say again because you have a mission, my friend. You have to do something about this. Well, and then you like follow hands-on coaching on social media. But and then next week we will have yet another inspiring conversation, and that will be with Linda Carlisle on making culture stick, the long game of integration. So, and that is totally not this topic, like where we what we have been talking about, Thomas. So, just you are unbelievable, and I am so happy that you found me or connected with me. I don't know if I did or you did, or well, thank Podmatch maybe. So, and just keep on doing what you're doing, and it's just like a brilliant work. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you.